You ever look back at something and think, wow, that was the moment everything started falling apart and I didn't even see it? Yeah, for me, that moment was when he handed me the Cartier box. The one wrapped in that perfect red ribbon that smelled like his cologne. That heavy, expensive kind that stays in your hair even after he leaves. Back then, I thought it was the scent of safety. Turns out, it was surveillance. And I met Richard about 3 years ago. I was 29. Working as a marketing analyst in this massive tech company where everyone talked in buzzwords and drank cold brew like it was oxygen. He was the CEO, the kind of guy who didn't walk into a room so much as shift the air in it. You know that type. The ones who make you feel like every sentence you say matters because they're actually listening. Or at least pretending to. When he noticed me during a presentation, I swear my brain short-circuited. He laughed at one of my slides. Not in a mean way, more like he was impressed that I made a quarterly report sound human. He said I had a rare emotional intelligence. I didn't know it then, but that was the first hook. Compliment the empathy, then weaponize it later. NNWE started seeing each other secretly at first. He said the company board wouldn't understand, and I agreed, because I was naive enough to think I was protecting him. He'd send me Uber codes after work, dinner reservations at places where the lighting was so dim it made everyone look flawless. He had this way of making even silence feel curated. I used to tell my best friend, he's the calm I didn't know I needed. Yeah, classic me. Confusing control with comfort. There were little things though. He'd ask for selfies when I went out with friends. Said it was cute that he missed me. Once, when I didn't text back for a few hours, he showed up at my apartment just to check in. I remember laughing and saying, "You're like my personal security detail." He smiled and said, "Exactly." I thought it was a joke. It wasn't, and about 6 months in, he started talking about how toxic the office politics were, and how I was too pure for that kind of environment. He said he'd cover my bills if I wanted to explore something creative. I actually considered it. The way he said it, it didn't sound controlling, it sounded romantic. Like he was saving me. But somewhere in my gut, something twisted. I'd worked my whole life to be independent, and suddenly I was being offered a golden cage. Lined with silk, sure, but still a cage. Then came the bracelet. It was a random Tuesday. He said he had a surprise waiting at home. I walked in, and there it was, sitting on the kitchen island like a proposal in disguise. "To remind you that you're never alone," he said. The words hit me as sweet at first. Now they make my stomach turn. I remember the click of the clasp. It sounded heavier than it should have, like something locking into place. But it was beautiful. Cartier, rose gold, tiny diamonds. I didn't question it. Why would I? When someone you love gives you something that sparkles, you don't look for screws. NNTHAT, night I fell asleep with it on, my wrist leaving a faint indentation on the sheets. He held my hand in his sleep, thumb brushing the bracelet like he was checking if it was still there. I thought it was intimacy. It was inventory and NBUT that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came later, when I realized he hadn't just been holding on to me. He'd been listening. Literally. It didn't happen all at once, the realization, I mean. It was more like small static building up in the background of my life. The kind you ignore until it's all you can hear. And a few weeks after the bracelet, he started finishing my sentences in this uncanny way. Not like a cute "we're so connected" thing, more like he knew the exact phrasing I'd used in conversations I hadn't told him about. Once, I mentioned over drinks with a coworker that I was thinking of applying for a creative strategy role in another department. The next morning, he called me into his office and said, almost casually, "I don't think that team deserves your energy." I remember laughing it off, telling myself it was just coincidence. But my chest was tight. You know that feeling when your body knows something before your brain does? NNHE had these phrases he'd use that always made me doubt myself. "You're overthinking again. You're too sensitive, Em. It's all in your head." At first, I believed him. Because that's what you do when you love someone who seems more confident than you. You hand them the map and assume they know the terrain better. But every time I started to trust him again, another coincidence would drop. Like the night I told my friend Mia, in my car, with the windows up, that Richard could be a little controlling sometimes. The next day, he texted me, "I hope you're not letting people put stupid ideas about me in your head." I stared at my phone so long that my coffee went cold. He He'd used the exact same word, controlling. It was like he'd been in the car with us. I actually checked my phone for hidden apps. Nothing NNTHE bracelet never even crossed my mind. One night, I came home late from a networking event, exhausted and half drunk on cheap champagne. The apartment was spotless, candles lit. That's how I knew he'd been waiting. Richard never lit candles unless he wanted to make a point. He was smiling, calm, too calm. He said he didn't like the tone I used when I spoke to a male coworker at the event. He said he'd heard enough to know where it was heading. I asked what that even meant, but he brushed it off with that practiced CEO tone. I just care about you. I'm protecting what's ours. Protecting. That word stuck like a splinter. NNHE gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't push me on this." So I didn't. I just nodded and went to shower. But my hands were shaking so bad, I dropped the Cartier clasp twice. The sound of it hitting the marble felt louder than thunder. For a second, I thought I heard something, a faint hum, almost like an old phone vibrating. I leaned in, but the water started running and drowned it out. I told myself I was just imagining things. Because that's easier, right? It's always easier to believe you're paranoid than to accept you're being watched. NNBUT over the next few days, I started noticing the hum again. Faint, mechanical, always when it was quiet. Once while brushing my teeth. Once when scrolling through Instagram. Once while crying into my pillow at 2 a.m. because I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was in the room. NNTHE night, it all clicked. It was silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skin. I took off the bracelet before bed, and for the first time, I really looked at it. Not as jewelry, but as an object. There was a small mark under the clasp, a tiny metal vent. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I grabbed a pin and scraped along the edge until it popped open. Inside was a microchip no bigger than a lentil. Blinking red, NNTHAT blink burned into me. It wasn't just a light, it was a confirmation. He'd been listening. Every word, every call, every fight, every breath. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I went completely still. No panic, no tears. Just this strange, cold clarity. NNIF love was supposed to make you feel seen. Why did I feel so invisible? I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream, I didn't throw the bracelet across the room. Didn't demand an explanation. I just sat there, staring at it, while the little red light blinked back at me like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Because here's the thing. When you finally see the truth about someone who's been controlling you, your first instinct isn't rage, it's disbelief. It's grief for the version of them you built in your head. And then I put the bracelet back on the counter and sat in the dark for hours. My mind kept looping through every conversation we'd had, every fight, every coincidence. It all made sense now. The reason he'd always known when I was upset. The way he'd parrot things I'd said in private. The way he could always read me. I used to call it intuition. Turns out it was intel. NNTHE next morning. I went through the motions. Smiled. Kissed him on the cheek. Let him believe nothing had changed. But inside, something had this quiet detachment, like I'd stepped out of my own body and was watching the performance from a distance. He poured coffee like he always did, said, "You look tired," and I almost laughed. Yeah, I was tired. Tired of mistaking surveillance for affection. NNTHAT day at work. I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped. I caught myself checking corners, glancing at the bracelet like it was a snake coiled around my wrist. But I didn't take it off. Not yet. Because part of me, the rational angry part, wanted proof. If he'd used tech to spy on me, I'd use it to expose him. NNTHAT night. I sat in bed, lights off, pretending to scroll through my phone while whispering things I wanted him to hear. I said I didn't feel safe. I said maybe I should talk to someone outside the company, maybe even a journalist. I said the words, potential lawsuit. My voice was shaking, but I made sure it sounded like a whisper meant only for myself. NNTHE next morning. He was waiting for me in the kitchen again, only this time, the smile didn't reach his eyes. He asked if I'd been talking to anyone new lately. I said no. He stared at me too long, that kind of stare that feels like a searchlight. Then he said, "You know I'd never hurt you, right? Everything I've done is for us." Classic. the For Us card, the abuser's national anthem. My hands were trembling under the table, but I just nodded, because I wanted him to keep believing he was still in control. Over the next few days, I kept feeding the bracelet little breadcrumbs, hints about files and secrets and things I wasn't supposed to know. I made sure to talk near it, sometimes just muttering to myself while brushing my hair. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was performing for a ghost. But if you wanted to listen, I was going to make the show worth it. NNBY Friday. Something shifted. He came home tense, jaw tight, eyes darting. He poured a drink, which he never did, before 8 p.m. He said the company was under review for a data leak and that he, quote, had reason to believe someone close to him might have made a mistake. His voice cracked on the word mistake. That's when I knew he'd taken the bait. NNTHAT night, he barely spoke, just kept checking his phone, pacing, muttering to himself. I sat there pretending to read, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my gums. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the bracelet on the table, still blinking faintly in the dark. Funny how that tiny light used to feel like a symbol of connection. And now, it looked like a warning signal, counting down to something I couldn't yet name. And I didn't sleep that night, because deep down, I already knew. The next time that red light blinked, it wouldn't just be recording me, it would be recording him. The next morning felt different. The air was too still, like the calm before a crash. Richard left early, muttering something about meetings with the board. He didn't kiss me goodbye, just grabbed his briefcase and went, leaving behind the faint smell of his cologne and a silence that felt like a held breath. I sat at the table, staring at the bracelet. The red light wasn't blinking anymore. I realized I'd never seen it stop before. For a second, I thought he'd figured it out, shut the whole thing down. But then my phone pinged. An internal company alert from IT about suspicious internal devices. My stomach flipped. The investigation had started. That's when it hit me. I'd started a chain reaction. One whisper about files, one fake hint about talking to someone, and now the entire company was chasing ghosts that didn't exist. Except for one ghost that did, the one on my wrist. And I took a deep breath, slipped the bracelet back on, and went to the office like it was any other day. But nothing about that day was normal. People were whispering, side eyes flying across cubicles. HR sent out a mass email about, quote, data integrity and confidentiality. You could feel the paranoia seeping through the glass walls. When I walked past Richard's office, his door was closed, which never happened. Through the frosted glass, I saw him pacing, phone to his ear, voice low and sharp. His calm CEO mask was cracking. I didn't even need to hear the words to know what kind of call it was. Damage control. Ending around noon, IT called a full audit of all executive devices. Laptops, phones, even smart accessories. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. A security tech stopped by my desk and politely asked if I was wearing any connected items. I told him yes. My fiancé had given me this Cartier bracelet. I thought it was just jewelry. NNTHE look on his face when the scanner picked up an encrypted signal from the clasp. I'll never forget it. His eyebrows shot up, then furrowed, and he said, "Ma'am, I think we need to log this." Within an hour, it wasn't just IT anymore. It was legal. Then HR. Then 2 board members. I sat in a small glass conference room with my hands folded on the table while they pulled data logs. The bracelet sat in front of them, coiled like a dead snake. Every few minutes, one of them would whisper something, and the others would glance at me, then at the bracelet, then back at each other. Finally, someone said it out loud. This device is registered to Richard Langford's corporate credentials. NNTHE silence that followed was heavy. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just kept my eyes on that stupid red gem at the center of the clasp, the one that used to catch light so beautifully in restaurants. Now it just reflected the fluorescent glare of the boardroom, cold and sterile. When Richard arrived, he looked pale. For once, he didn't have that composed, charming posture. He walked in fast, saw the bracelet and froze. For a second, he looked at me, and I swear, it wasn't anger I saw. It was fear. The kind of fear people get when they realize the story they've been writing about themselves has just been edited by someone else. NNHE, tried to speak, something about misunderstanding, about trying to protect intellectual property. But the words tangled. Every lie sounded like static now. And I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. They escorted him out of the building that afternoon. No raised voices. No scandal. Just a man in an expensive suit walking out of the glass tower he'd built, under the eyes of the people who used to worship him. And as the elevator doors closed behind him, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in months. It wasn't victory. It was oxygen, bought NNBUT. The weirdest part? I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. Because when someone's been controlling your reality long enough, freedom feels like silence. And silence can be terrifying. For the first few days after everything imploded, I felt like I was living in a muted movie. Every sound was too sharp. The click of my apartment door, the buzz of my phone, the hum of the fridge. Silence used to be peace. Now it was proof that no one was listening. NNTHE Company issued a formal statement about a breach of personal privacy conducted by a now former executive. They didn't use his name, but everyone knew. People whispered about me in the halls, some with pity, some with fascination. "She's the one with the bracelet," they said, like I was some cursed artifact. I started eating lunch in my car just to avoid the stares. NNTHE board offered me a settlement to ensure my comfort and cooperation. I signed the papers without reading the fine print. I didn't want their money. I wanted to feel like myself again, but when the deposit hit my account, I stared at the balance and realized he'd found a way to own even my closure. Anna moved out of the apartment we shared the next weekend. Packing was strange. I didn't cry, didn't smash anything. I just folded my life into boxes and watched it shrink. The hardest part was realizing how many of my things, the clothes, the perfume, the coffee machine, were gifts from him. For a second, I caught myself hesitating over the little notes he used to leave. "For your first morning as my fiancé. To remind you, I'm always close." The handwriting looked elegant and harmless. I threw them away anyway. NNTHE bracelet, though, I couldn't throw that out. I kept it in a drawer, wrapped in a paper towel like something radioactive. Every time I thought about tossing it, I'd hear his voice in my head saying, "You're too emotional." So I left it there, quiet and contained, like the ghost of a version of me I didn't want to resurrect. Anna and I started therapy a few weeks later. The first session, my therapist asked me what I missed most about him. I said, "The attention." She smiled, not in a judgmental way, more like she'd heard it 1,000 times. "Attention feels like love," she said, "until it starts to feel like surveillance." That line stuck with me. I wrote it down in my notes app and kept rereading it whenever I felt the urge to text him, which, embarrassingly, was often. Trauma's funny that way. It makes you crave the same poison you escaped. Months passed. I changed my number, started freelancing. I bought a new phone, a new laptop, a new lock for my door. But it wasn't until I sat in a tiny co-working space one afternoon, sunlight spilling across my keyboard, no red lights blinking anywhere, that I realized I was finally breathing normally again. That's when I got the idea. NNA platform for digital safety, specifically for women in relationships where care feels a little too close to control. I started drafting features, connecting with cybersecurity people, learning about data privacy laws. For the first time, all that pain started to look like material. Like purpose. Maybe I couldn't stop what happened to me, but I could make sure someone else noticed the hum before it got too loud. It's been almost a year now. I don't wear jewelry anymore, not even watches. My wrists feel naked, but free. Every once in a while, I'll open that drawer, look at the Cartier bracelet, and think about how something so beautiful could carry something so ugly inside it. Then I close it again. Sometimes I wonder what he tells people now, if he paints himself as the victim of some paranoid ex. Maybe he does. Maybe he believes it. Narcissists have that gift. But every time I start to care, I remind myself, he wanted to know everything about me, and now he gets nothing. Silence isn't scary anymore. It's mine, and I still think about that night sometimes. The red light blinking in the dark, proof of the truth I didn't want to see. An NSO. Here's my question. If someone gave you a gift like that, would you wear it proudly, or would you hear the hum too?